underwear. It's Founders Day. What y'all doing sitting over there on the couch eating a dang sandwich? Get yourself the calico, put on some appropriate footwear, and don't forget to bring a party hat. Happy Founders Day!
Hello and welcome to The Lowdown on the Plus Up, a podcast where we look at everyone's favorite theme park attractions, lands, textures, and novelties. We talk in, over, about, and through our week's topic, and then, with literally no concern for practicality, safety, or economic viability, we come up with ways to make them better. My name is Kelly McCubbin, columnist for the theme park website Boardwalk Times, and with me, as always, is Peter Overstreet, University Professor of Animation and Film History in Northern California. So, Pete.
Hey there.
What are we talking about today?
Well, today is going to be an odd episode. As a matter of fact, just before we started recording this, we actually were just commenting on how odd this episode is going to be. So what we're going to talk about today is linked to Kelly's and my recent trip. Mm-hmm. And during that trip, it was inspired by it. We went, Kelly, I had never been to Star Wars Galaxy's Edge at Disneyland before. And Kelly was very enthusiastic. Like, no, Pete, you're going to like this. Yeah. If nothing else, the environments are really, really cool.
Yeah.
But I had heard about the interactive notion of it. Mm-hmm. And so I went there thinking there's going to be a lot of characters running around. It's going to be a lot of, there's all this stuff that the press was touting and a lot of fans. And I have notes. And
all right, but before we get into your notes, let's a couple other things. It's much inspired by that. Also inspired by a lot of hype recently about the closing of the Galactic Starcruiser.
Yes,
particularly because Jenny Nicholson's video's gone so through the roof.
It's at 9. Last I checked, it was at 9 million views.
Yeah, and good on her, man. She worked hard on that. That's 4 hours long, and it's riveting.
And she got taken on by Disney, who tried to have it taken down on copyright purposes, and she won. And so it's still up.
Yeah.
Good for you, Jenny.
It sounds like they tried to push on like some music being in the background and the music being copyrighted. And she's smart. She's smart enough to know how to deal with that by now.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, so we were interested in that. And then it occurred to us that there was some interesting parallels, oddly, with our ideas of interactivity in theme parks and the closing of the Galactic Starcruiser and the recent closing of Evermore Park in Utah. Mm-hmm. But before we jump into this, a couple of quick news things I wanted to throw at you.
Go for it.
One, do you know who Pepe del Presidio is?
Pepe del Presidio.
Yes.
Cool name. I have no clue who they are.
Pepe del Presidio is the tiki room bird that is in the Walt Disney Family Museum.
Oh, wow. Okay. Now it makes sense.
Yeah. Which I have pictures of you manipulating.
Okay. Okay.
In a controlled manner. And Pepe's going down for some refurb. And what I found out recently, they're sending him off down south to, guess where?
Kevin and Jody's?
Nope.
Oh, who?
Garner Holt.
Oh, Garner Holt. Awesome.
Yeah. So we wish Pepe well on his flight down south for the summer. And one other thing that we didn't mention last time, but I really wanted to get in, was the Lee Adams update, which is, and Pete watched me do it. I asked Bob Gurr about Lee Adams. If you've been following us for a while, I'm a little bit obsessed with Imagineer Lee Adams, who has nothing reported on him, and other people tell me he's not that big a deal. But I think that there's a story here. And I asked...
When Kelly asked Bob,
mm-hmm.
only one person made any noise in the audience, and that was me, laughing uproariously because I knew what was coming. And Bob, everybody kind of looked back at me like, who's this cackling maniac in the back row? And I'm just going, oh, I know what he's going to ask. So anyway, go ahead, Kelly, continue.
And Bob, and maybe you can confirm this, Bob answered a different question than what I had actually asked.
It was a good dodge.
But it was, it was an interesting answer anyway. He knew who I was talking about for sure. He had worked with Lee Adams, and he talked about oddly enough, given our last episode was about the Autopia, how Lee Adams, being the kind of electrician he was trying to use direct current to power parts of the Autopia automobiles, and really wasn't working. And basically Bob took over and sort of said, hey, Lee, let me handle this, and took it from there. So that was that. It wasn't the question I asked, but I did ask Bob Gurr, ladies and gentlemen. and what other podcast host can say that?
Another thing I want to do before we really get into stuff is this episode is actually, and you'll find out why, this episode is actually dedicated to Martin Mull, who passed away recently.
Right.
So let's get back to the subject matter. The subject matter that we're going to be discussing is this buzzword that has been floating around now for about a decade, roughly, and that is immersion, interactive immersion in theme park attractions.
Right, and to kind of start off, let's sort of define, if we can, the distinction between immersion and interactivity.
Yes.
Do you have thoughts on this?
Yes, okay. They are not the same thing.
Yeah,
that is my position on this. Immersion. Well, let's actually get back to our trip, because this is an excellent example of the distinction between immersion and interactivity.
Yes.
My first reaction to Galaxy's Edge was, holy crap, look at all this amazing stuff. Look, Kelly will tell you, I was walking around with my jaw hitting the floor with the level of detail, like me going, wow, there's a Gonk droid. Wow, there's a full-size A-Wing fighter. One of my favorite fighter designs from the original series of films. I love A-Wings. I used to fly them a lot in the X-Wing, PC game. Really awesome. And then I got chills. I almost started actually tearing up when I saw the full-size Millennium Falcon, and I didn't think I would do that. But what also helped was the fact that there was a cast member dressed as Chewbacca there. It was like, well, I'm in. Let's go for it. Let's see what happens. And we jumped right on the Millennium Falcon ride. And Kelly had gone out of his way, bless him, to get us reservations at
Oga's Cantina. Yeah.
We woke up early. We made a beeline for Batu, and we got to Oga's Cantina. I had a reservation. We got in, we sat down, and I immediately started getting bored. Here's how the little experience went. We got in. The first thing we go, like, wow, it's a Star Wars cantina. Wow, here's these aliens up behind the bar. Look at all the ID-88 droid parts that are being used as fountainheads and all that kind of stuff. Oh, there's Rex from Star Tours.
Right.
And frankly, that's actually the best part of Oga's cantina.
Yeah.
And then we were seated in one of the alcove booths.
Yeah.
I ordered a drink. I ordered a fuzzy tauntaun. I know Kelly ordered something else.
So,
Kelly is sober, so he said no, but he had something else. And we ordered the food, and we waited for about 20 minutes for both.
Yeah.
And while we were there, we were just sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting. And then the most interactive thing happened. A family sat down with two sweet little girls dressed up as Rey from the new Star Wars movies.
Yeah.
And two moms and a grandparent, and they were crammed into the booth next to us, and they all proceeded to look bored. Yeah. And the most interactive moment was me asking one of the moms, are you bored, or is it just me? The lady said she mirrored my thoughts, which is they need to have characters in here that interact with you in some way so that you're pulled in.
Right.
And she came up with some great ideas, and I thought it was a great conversation.
She did, yeah.
And Kelly and I went, well, we've seen it. Let's go to the rest of Disneyland. I mean, the environment was spectacular. Like I looked at it, I said, wow, they have like these little note boards that are in the weird Star Wars language font and all these little details. I give them, it gets like an A++ as far as immersion. You really feel like you're in that world.
Yeah.
But then the whole thing falls apart the minute you expect anything interactive.
It's really interesting to me. So I think I agree with you there. And we can use that as an example of the difference between immersion and interactivity. And we can use some things about Galaxy's Edge as a whole, which I like. I do like Galaxy's Edge.
I do too.
Yeah, we can use some things as a whole where we can say, you walk in, you see the Millennium Falcon, you see these kind of cool machines, you see A-Wings, you see X-Wings, you see all this stuff, and the immersion is strong.
Oh, yeah.
So that's immersion. Having a conversation with Chewbacca, that's interactivity.
Which Kelly did.
Which
was so great. I think he was actually taller than Chewbacca. Kelly is.
Yeah.
and Chewie kind of got his eye. You could see the cast member's eyes kind of light up, like somebody who's taller than me. Chewie's going to meet somebody taller. So he started to walk up to Kelly, and this kid jumps out in front of Chewie and starts going, ah! And Kelly just looks over at Chewbacca.
I just looked at him and said, that was inappropriate. To which Chewbacca looked at me and nodded his head and went, "Bleh." Kind of walked on.
Yeah, it was pretty great for the 10 seconds that it happened.
Yeah.
But we were there for 2 days, and we tried Kelly introduced me to the Magic Band interactive panels that are all over Batuu. So I gave in. I bought the cheapest Magic Band I could get over in Frontierland, slapped it on, turned it on.
I went and took a nap.
He did. He's like, I'm going to rest out. I go, I'm going to try this because this is my experiment. I'm going to try this. Like, I'm going to go all the way and see what happens. Mm-hmm. Like, there's got to be something that's really cool that happens. And I did the Bounty Hunter interactive game that they have in Batuu. I went up to the screen, flashed it, and it says, okay, you want to join the Bounty Hunters Guild? Look for this person. And I didn't know how this works, and Kelly was just starting to show me how it worked. And one of the cast members, I can't remember his name, but dude, you were awesome.
Yeah.
He started helping us, started talking through with us, and actually tried staying in character with it. Except there was another podcaster there who spied like my Tomorrowland badge. Went, I have a podcast about Tomorrowland, and then the whole thing fell apart.
Yeah.
But you know what? It was still fun. It was still fun to interact with these guys, and it was really, really great.
And I just to give him credit for the niche of his podcast. His podcast wasn't about the land Tomorrowland. His podcast was about the movie Tomorrowland. And I was like, dude, you are cool. You are people like us.
Yeah, and he was so cool. And the guy is probably like listening, going, they're talking about me. And I'm so sorry. I cannot remember your name because I looked everywhere for your card that you gave me. I couldn't find it. So I'm so sorry. But I'm sure at some point, for those who listen regularly, that Kelly on social media will post updates of saying, here's some fact checking. So I'm sure we will find his podcast and forward it over to you.
Yeah. And jump onto our Facebook group. That's where we post all that stuff. And we actually add pictures and we enriched information and stuff on there. And we tell you when we get stuff wrong, which we do.
Oh, yeah. A lot. So anyway, I did the bounty hunter thing, and it's like 20 some odd bounties that you have to do.
Wasn't it 20 exactly?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I could open up the app, and you use the Magic Band, but you also have to download the app onto your phone of the Disneyland Play app. Mm-hmm. So you go up to the panel. It tells you, look for this Jawa. He's worth 350 credits. Mm-hmm. So, okay. And your Magic Band will start pulsing. So it's a little bit like you're getting warmer or you're getting colder, and it'll vibrate and it'll flash red. So it's pulsing more and more and more. And you actually start getting into it. So it's a little bit like having suspense music building up in your body of going, and you go, aha, here it is. And you use your phone to scan the door. And all of a sudden you can have like this X-ray, quote unquote X-ray scan, and it'll show you the little Jawa on the other side of the door, and it goes, bounty collected.
Yeah.
And then you run back to the door and you put your hand in this special panel, and this video panel opens up and these pair of alien eyes come out and say, I see you found your first bounty. Oh, you are definitely going to be a great candidate for the guild. You know? And it slams shut and it gives you 350 credits. You go, I'm going to do that again. That was easy. Kelly took a nap I think he was gone for about 2.5 hours.
Yeah, that's about right.
The entire time that he was gone, I was doing this thing. I didn't stop for a bathroom break. I didn't stop for snacks. I didn't stop to shop for lightsabers. I did the whole, and it took forever.
I was surprised that you kept going.
I was dedicated to doing this. But when I finally did it, I get a bounty of Benicio del Toro, and it's like, okay, cool. Now what?
Yeah.
Well, now you get to start the whole thing all over again. You're like, that's the same Jawa I started with. Yeah. And then you go, And so it's very anticlimactic. But during my final bounty, this is just total serendipity. This is not a feature of the game. Total serendipitous moment. I was at one of the doorways and I was scanning the door, and all of a sudden I feel this tap on my shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
And I turn around. I thought it was Kelly. And I turn around and there's Boba Fett. And he says, "Are you trying to collect my bounties?" And I went, I would never do that. I'm trying to assist the guild, that kind of stuff, And his handler, every cast member who's a costume, they have a handler to make sure they don't fall over, make sure people don't mess with them. The handler says, "So have you picked your bounty hunter name yet?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And they said, "What?" It's Hauser. He goes, "Hauser?" I go, "Yeah, Hauser by you." And the assistant goes, "Hauser by you?" I said, "I don't know. Hauser by you." And Boba Fett gave me these double finger guns like, "Hey-yo!" And he just walked away. Like, that was it. But it was like this great little moment, and I wanted to keep going. Like, I kind of wanted him to challenge me, like, in some way. Like, let's play a game of Sabak or Chance Cube to see who gets this bounty. Like, that would have been cool.
Yeah.
Opportunity completely missed out with someone who's obviously wanting to play.
Right.
And that's when I had the idea for this podcast, which is, for this particular episode, which is, okay, we've got interactivity in the park, but it's not working. And this needs to, like, this would be fabulous. It's fabulous immersion, but they didn't sell it on immersion. They sold it on interactivity.
Yeah.
And they had just recently suffered this closure of the Intergalactic Starcruiser and Evermore. And there's all this talk about all these people obviously disappointed and obviously wanting this to happen.
Right.
So I thought it'd be kind of cool for us to examine this phenomenon that's fairly new in the theme park world and examine, like, well, why didn't this work in Galaxy's Edge or Intergalactic Starcruiser or Evermore? And yet it does work at a few other places that we're going to talk about tonight. So we're going to talk about that. And by the way, I've been saying Intergalactic Starcruiser. I meant Galactic Starcruiser. Disney, do not sue me. So that's okay.
Well, they clearly don't care about it anymore.
Well, it's apparently the planetary, Starcruiser because it's grounded. Yeah. So Galactic Starcruiser, yes.
So you were talking about that this is a technique that has worked in the past.
It has worked in the past, and it is still being used by different venues with some degree of absolute success. As a matter of fact, it's banked on heavily by some places.
Yeah.
I mean, Kelly and I are both experimenters with LARP. Kelly did a lot of LARPing in his youth. I've done Nordic LARPing over in Sweden.
Can't believe you outed me like that.
We've all done the Vampire Masquerade thing. We've all done that, I mean, I blame Tom Hanks and Mazes and Monsters.
Yeah.
Of starting with a tabletop game, going into role-playing games, and then like, hey, let's go into the sewers dressed up in bad theater costumes and then go crazy.
Yeah.
Yay, Satanic Panic.
Right.
But I have always wanted to be immersed in different worlds.
Right.
And I think what did it for me, Colonial Williamsburg in Virginia.
Oh, yeah.
So for those who do not know, Colonial Williamsburg is a 18th century village that is still maintained as an 18th century village. They have shops, they have blacksmiths, they have weavers, and they also have British soldiers and American soldiers trying to tell you to either stay loyal to the king or to actually join the revolution.
Right.
They have all aspects of life, and the docents stay in character. They want you to feel like you have stepped back in time into that American colonial era. And when I went on this road trip with my grandparents when I was 12 years old, they took me there, and my grandfather bought me a tricorn hat. He bought me a poofy shirt.
Yeah.
And he goes, okay. And he bought me a vintage pencil and a pad of paper, of handmade paper. He says, okay, this trip is not just for fun. We're teaching you about American history.
Yeah.
So, we eventually wound up in Washington, D.C. on this trip. Anyway, excuse me. We went to Colonial Williamsburg, and my grandfather just said, no offense, you're going to go off on your own.
Yeah.
I want you to find someone and interview them about their life.
Oh, that's so great.
And you're going to be a journalist, and you're going to interview them about their life and what they're doing today.
Yeah.
And I want you to come back and give me a report.
Yeah.
So I went looking around. I went to all the different places. I went to a blacksmith shop, but there was like so many kids looking at this guy making sparks. And it was okay. I went to a weaver. Wasn't that impressive. And I got a little bored and I sat down at this bench and there was a guy reading a newspaper. Mm-hmm. And they even have a printing press where they print a daily newspaper.
Yeah.
And the guy lowered his newspaper, and it was the docent dressed up as Benjamin Franklin.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I went, "Excuse me, Dr. Franklin?" Because I was already a big Ben Franklin nerd. And I said, "Excuse me, Dr. Franklin?" And he's, well, "Yes." I said, "Hi, my name's Peter Overstreet. I'm from Maine, and I wanted to, I'm looking for someone to interview about life here in Williamsburg for our newspaper and about the changing times that seem to be going on around here. Do you have a moment to answer some questions?" He says, "Why, certainly, young man." And so we talked for a little bit, and then I actually really blew his mind. I said, "So when you were in Paris and you met Madame Tussaud, were you impressed by her waxworks?" And he kind of went, "Hold on." He says, "Look, I have to meet someone for lunch. Would you care to join?" And he bought me lunch at the tavern.
Wow.
So he bought me Welsh rabbit and some apple cider, which they hand press there. It's not Martinelli's. They hand press it at Williamsburg.
Yeah.
And in comes Thomas Jefferson. So I spent lunch with Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson. And for a fleeting moment, I really... we're in this conspiratorial, colonial, Dr. Sin alias the Scarecrow like booth with just candlelight lighting everything. And I went, I'm back in time.
Yeah.
Whoa, this is, and it messes with your head. You're like, whoa. And it wasn't until I left the tavern and I finally saw some dudes in bad Bermuda shorts, I went, okay, I'm still in the 20th century. But that's when I got bitten by the bug with interactivity and immersion. And so I've always been fascinated by this particular art form because it is not just, to me, it's not just an art form of a physical environment. It is not just an art form of a bunch of actors in costume. The art form also takes place in the brain of every single audience member. And the trick is that none of them has the exact same story going on in their head.
Yes.
And that makes it very, very difficult for a lot of organizers to wrap their heads around.
Yeah.
And so we're going to talk about that with the rest of the show.
Yeah, for sure. It takes a very specialized kind of performer to deal with an audience that is interested in participating, is interested in doing what we'll sort of casually call role playing here, and to draw them, not only draw them in, but make them feel safe in participating.
The Lowdown on the Plus Up is a Boardwalk Times podcast. At boardwalktimes.net, you'll find some of the most well-considered and insightful writing about the Walt Disney Company, Disney history, and the universe of theme parks available anywhere. Come join us at boardwalktimes.net.
Absolutely. So I've had some experience with, and I want to add some definitions here in this, some classifications actually of audience members.
Yeah.
You have from a wide range. So on one side of the spectrum, in the red side of the spectrum to green, red to green, you have the completely disinterested. They're not interested. They don't care. They don't want to be there, whatever.
Right.
Then you have the casually interested who are like, well, this is neat. Yeah, let's go get a bud.
Yeah.
Then there are the people who are very interested. Those who are like, okay, I want to see what's going on here. This is really neat. I got to come back. I want to tell people about this. This is cool.
Yeah.
Then you have the next level, which is a term that I call white elephants.
Okay.
White elephants are the ones that'll actually start dressing up. They don't say much, but they just want to be part of the environment. Like
right.
They don't want to feel like they stand out and take away.
They want to participate, but they're maybe shy.
Right. It's various levels of shyness, or they're just not really an actor. They're not really into that kind of stuff, but they don't want to take away from it by showing up in blue jeans and a t-shirt. They actually like, no, I really want to wear a costume of the era because I still want to internally feel like this, but don't talk to me.
Yeah.
And then lastly, on the other side of the spectrum, the full green is what I call velveteen rabbits. And these people are the ones that get dressed up. They buy their ticket. They show up multiple days. And they will actually adopt their own character name, their own persona, and will actually start befriending performers and interacting with them directly, thus contributing to the fabric of that reality. And they're not even like official cast members.
Yeah. And, it's really interesting. So I think, bringing this to Evermore for a second, I think that those people carried Evermore on their backs for like a long, long time.
Absolutely.
And it's stunning to me. So, Evermore was deeply underfunded right from the beginning. We kind of know this right away. It was put together by Ken Brentschneider, who basically sold his stake in DigiCert, which he founded, to build Evermore.
And what year was that? Do you remember?
Oh, that would have been a little before 2016, I think.
Okay.
Evermore itself was open from 2018 to 2024. Okay. As far as we know, the earliest mention of it, or the earliest mention that kind of got some traction, was about 2016.
Okay.
Which is when they went to Comic-Con in San Diego.
Right.
And had a little booth.
Right.
And at that point, much like the Galactic Starcruiser, the promises were very large.
Yes.
That's kind of where that all started off. A couple of Imagineers from Disney, both of which had worked, I believe, on Shanghai.
Yeah.
Got pulled over. This Josh Shipley and Josh Stedman got pulled over to do design. It seems pretty clear to me that it was underfunded from the beginning. It's small. Like the location for Evermore's 13 acres. By comparison, Disneyland, just the park, not the resort, Disneyland Park is 85 acres. So Evermore was like the size of a land.
Yeah.
In Disneyland. They were underfunded. They had some kind of broad ideas.
Yeah.
About what they were going to do. And it seems like they were struggling from the get-go to implement them.
Yeah.
But and this is why I mentioned it, to get back to what you were just saying about people that become deeply invested in this kind of interactive experience, people did. People grabbed on. And Evermore was a place that actually seemed to be paying attention to what the people were doing, to listen to the two Joshes from Imagineering.
Yeah.
What they claimed was that early on, that they would go to the park, like in previews in the first several weeks, and see what people were doing, and literally go to the fabrication shop, which was 5 minutes away from the park, and build it and have it in there in a few days. How much this actually happened compared to what they described is a little vague, because a lot of stuff never got built there. But it did sound like they were very gung-ho about having the customers, having the guests influence the story and playing along with that. And the guests took to it. And the guests kept that place open for, 6 years?
Yeah.
6 years where there were buildings that weren't finished on day one and they weren't finished on the last day.
Yeah.
Like they had problems. There was an entire season of Evermore where they just fired everybody through a text message.
Oh, God.
And didn't open.
Oh, gee.
And then asked for people to come work for them for free, and people did. Oh. People were deeply devoted to Evermore in spite of the fact that it seemed to lack money and it seemed to be unable to progress. So you can't, I guess my point here is you can't discount those people that were obviously hungry for this kind of entertainment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there was a promise there that people saw, and a potential that people saw, and they were like, they wanted to be Velveteen Rabbits. They were like, we want to be a part of this. Like, it was like the most epic role-playing game idea ever of, you have built this world, and you are looking for people to inhabit it. I shall inhabit it. And I have to admit, in those early days, having seen all the videos, if I lived in Utah, I probably would have wound up there.
Yeah.
And going, I'll participate. What do you need? Give me a corner and I'll take over it. And that's my shtick, is right there.
And one of the other things that I think pulled people in, and I'm with you, I would have been fascinated.
Yeah.
One of the other things that pulled people in, and this is a cautionary note for people trying to do this kind of thing, is that people were drawn in because there was a lack of separation between the performers and the guests.
Yeah.
And this became a problem at Evermore. And it doesn't seem like anyone was ever hurt, but it does seem like there were guests who overstepped their bounds with the performers. There was some sort of attachments that the guests thought they had with the performers that weren't real. There were also points where the performers trusted the guests too much. Have you heard about the night that Evermore went dark?
No.
So at one point they were in Lore, which is their spooky time of the year, their autumn season. And there are monsters sort of in the fringes of Lore.
Yeah.
And the people that work there, the performers that are the good guys, sort of keep the monsters at bay. Except one night, the performers decided it would be a really fun idea to have the monsters win. And so the monsters charged into the supposedly safe areas.
Oh, dear.
And the heroic performers started yelling at the customers to escape.
Oh, no.
So they started yelling at them like, run, you've got to get out. And they kept saying like, they're coming, you've got to get out. This is problematic for so many reasons.
Yeah.
It's problematic because if you're there with a kid and the kid's somewhere else, you're suddenly running out the front gate without your kid. You don't know if there is a shooter. You don't know if there's a fire. You don't know. So this is the double-edged sword of really, really trying to form relationships between the performers and the audience. Mistakes can get made.
Absolutely. And this is one of the reasons why Disney still kind of frowns upon guests dressing as cast members.
That's right.
It's because of that delineation, because all it takes is one guest who's wearing the white security hat or wearing the Jungle Cruise skipper attire that can mess the whole thing up with a bad, stage direction to audience members or leading them someplace they don't need to go or being a trusted person where something's going to go wrong.
Right.
I think the other part is, there was a promise of interactivity. There was a lot of great characters that would, like the characters themselves actually started becoming a sales point. Like there was a dwarven forger who, ran the bar, and there was a couple of brothers, there was all these different characters, the falconers. And that was kind of cool. Like it was kind of goes back to the Wally Bogue factor of like, come and meet this character.
Right.
They're here.
Yeah.
That's kind of neat. But you could lead to that type of issue.
Well, and one of the characters that evidently rose to some prominence really quickly was this. It was actually a puppeted character with someone doing a voice that was known as the Fae King. And interestingly, it's one of the examples of the designers of the park watching to see. He was kind of an afterthought. He was someone they wanted to develop later, but they went ahead and put him in at the beginning, and they discovered that people loved him. And so they suddenly put him in a place of prominence. They built him up. They staffed him all day long, and he became this huge character because the audience loved him.
Yeah. I think what really killed it, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people who make comments and so forth, but my humble opinion of Evermore is some of that lack of delineation, some of also that lack of dedication to growing truly organically.
Yeah.
Which I think a lot of these entertainments fall flat on their face. They want to grow so big, so fast, and they don't realize that it actually happens a lot more organically than you think.
Yeah.
And there's some examples of this. And one of the examples is other fantasy adventure attractions out there
Yeah.
that I would like to mention briefly. We're not going to go super deep, but these are ones that started early, much earlier than Evermore, and are still successfully in operation.
Okay.
One of which started in 1994 in Quebec, and it is called the Duchy de Bicoline.
Okay.
Bicoline is a fantasy live action role-playing combat experience. It started in 1994, and it became the Grand Battle, or the Grand Bataille, in which people will come from miles to participate in this giant boffer sword LARP action fight.
Okay.
They build stockades. They have campgrounds. They have taverns. They have shops. They have grocery stores. It is a fully functional LARP environment that is only run for a short period of time during the summer in Quebec. And thousands of people. There's actually a travel group that will take Americans up as a bus tour and get you right into Bicoline and going for a week.
Huh.
And there's 3 or 4 guilds. It's heavily involved with its lore, and you can choose to be as involved as you want to be or as non-involved as you want to be.
What do you do there if you're not that involved? Is it still just like kind of a nice environment to hang out in?
I mean, they have everything ranging from you just want to come out and party and hang out. Or you can go on nighttime quests in order to shut down cultists in the middle of the forest. I mean, and if you don't do it, your faction will lose the battle. Or you will gain a dragon for the battle.
Okay.
And your character evolves. You gain reputation points, and they actually have their own banking system, Kelly.
Right. Wow.
Yeah, like they have their own coins and their own banking. Like you can exchange all of your money for Bicoline money. It's crazy.
Which is worth exactly the same as your own money, but it's fun.
Right. Just like Disney dollars.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much, so that's one. And this is like very organic. It's not like it's a big corporate event. It's just somebody who had a lot of land. And I'm sure someone either in English or en français is going to totally correct me about Bicoline. I'm fascinated by Bicoline. I would actually like to visit it at some point. Because
sounds super neat.
It sounds super cool.
Yeah.
It's roughly you're expected probably anywhere from $800 to $1,500 when all is said and done. That's your food, that's your campground, that's your gear, the works. Now, if you want to get more involved, you can.
Yeah.
But for us LARPers who grew up going, I want to do something like that at least once in my life, that might be the place to try.
Yeah, and it does sound like kind of what Evermore was ultimately going for.
Agreed.
They were trying to build into that, but sort of inexplicably, they just never paid for it. Now, I do want to say, so neither of us ever went to Evermore, and neither of us are super rich, so we could never go to the Galactic Starcruiser. But my wife and kid went to Evermore.
Yes.
And they had a great time. It sounded very ramshackle. It was late, like maybe a year and a half before it closed. It was, a lot of it was broken down. It was organizationally chaotic, but they had fun. There were performers there that they could latch onto, and they would get sent on these little quests. Sometimes the quest seemed just kind of made up on the fly, often just to screw with another cast member in another part of the park. But they had a nice time there. So there's something there. There's a spark that was good, and if they had really invested in it, I don't think they'd be closed now.
So let's talk about another one of these geeky adventures.
Please.
And I say geeky affectionately because I am. Okay, so there's another one for those.
I ran a changeling LARP. I can't be pretentious about this.
That's dedicated.
Yeah. I'm hypnotizing Pete with my glamour right now.
Wow. So there's another one that's a company called True Adventures.
Okay.
They operate mostly at gaming conventions, most notably Gen Con.
Okay.
They are known, it's a company that was started by a gentleman by the name of Jeff Martin, and it's called the company's called True Adventure, but their activities are called True Dungeon and the True Dungeon Fantasy Tavern.
Okay.
So you should check them out at some point. And so they have various story arcs, various. So they've had like the Teeth of Cavadar, which is the ongoing one. They also have the Missing Dwarfs of Ice Crag Keep.
Yeah.
So it's really involved. So it's almost its own entire role playing game that you can jump into very easily and play and still feel a level of immersion and interactivity.
Yeah.
Without it being as involved as say Bicoline or Evermore.
Right.
And because it is ongoing, they're still running it like crazy.
Yeah.
So that's another one that I should note where the mechanics are part of the interactive experience and part of the attraction to the interactive experience. The last thing I want to mention along these lines is actually Anita Connor and Stuart Kuramoto down in Santa Clara. It started in the Santa Cruz Mountains and then moved to Los Gatos, and it is now wound up in Santa Clara. Mm-hmm. This troupe of actors kind of run a haunt, but it's not a classic haunted house.
Yeah.
It almost always has been more of a family-oriented nighttime adventure, kind of a linear adventure with this level of, here's a quick little shtick, here's some interactivity, let's move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
They have recently, sometimes it's been called The Haunted Forest, sometimes it's been called Goblin's Glen. Sometimes it's been called Grimm's Hollow, which is its current incarnation, and it's mainly aimed at families and kids. And again, it's all volunteer. It's to raise money for schools. And they now have a maze where they have different paths that you can take. Left, right, over to here, over to here.
Yeah.
Your choices will affect your next, you can take a secret route back to this way and see that thing, or do this and do that. And it's really clever, but it's very, very simple. But people love it because it's so simple, it's easy to do, and it's just enough to get your yayas of immersion and interactivity, but not feel like there's a massive commitment. So that's like the wide spectrum from Bicoline to Grimm's Hollow.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. A lot of what we've been talking about so far has been this kind of LARPy role-playing interactivity. And I think that is exactly the sort of thing that we're seeing the big theme parks starting to promise more and more. That's what they're going for. Whether or not they deliver is a whole other question. And as we know, well, first off, Galaxy's Edge, and then later the Galactic Starcruiser had a whole lot of promise.
Oh, yeah.
As far as, reputation tracking and really enhancements to your role playing.
And we're not just talking about a light promise like, oh, I see promise in this. No, they were really promising us this.
Yeah, no. They said flat out that's what they were doing.
Yeah.
And they flat out didn't. But what's interesting to me about this is that they had done trial runs prior to opening Galaxy's Edge and prior to opening the Galactic Starcruiser, where they absolutely did do this. Legends of Frontierland,
yes,
is maybe the great example. It ran
for 4 months.
For 4 months total.
That's it.
That was it. But you could come and participate, and things you did affected things. And characters rolled with the story, and people loved it.
I got to do this one.
Tell me about it.
Loved Legends of Frontierland.
Yeah.
And I knew something was up.
Yeah.
And
this is Disneyland Park.
Yeah. And I know this sounds so cynical of me, but I knew I knew this wasn't a permanent thing.
Oh, yeah.
I really wish it was.
Yeah. And in fact, when I've seen pictures of it for the first month or so, the signs are kind of just crayon on paper, man. They didn't do much. Later, they got a little savvier with that, but not much.
Yeah, by the time I went, it was August. And so they had enough time to kind of develop it. They had a jail where you could fill out a wanted poster on your dad or somebody. And if somebody found your dad that brought you back, then they were rewarded with coins that they could then take. They were literally wooden coins that said, what do you call it? Legends of Frontierland.
Yeah.
And trade it in at this trading post that was a real estate. So I had this big map of Rainbow Ridge, Big Thunder Canyon, and you would buy parts of land.
Yeah.
So by the end of the day, all the different people buying these different parts of land, And you'd get other things like little paper stickers and stuff like, I did this in this part of Frontierland, you know?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, they would tally up how many people had scored one team or the other. And they would raise the flag over the front, over the fort, which is the entrance of Frontierland from Main Street, with either an RR for Rainbow Ridge or BTC for, Big Thunder Canyon.
Yeah.
And so you were basically it was a fight for dominance of who.
Right, and it wasn't the idea that the people of Rainbow Ridge had decided they were going to move into the canyon.
Yeah,
and so the people from the canyon, being the NIMBYs that they are, didn't want those rowdy yokels from up the hill.
Absolutely, and there was they had a training post, they had a sheriff's office. You could go into one of our favorite places, the Golden Horseshoe, and gamble. Simple gambling, like blackjack and that kind of stuff.
I think they played high card almost exclusively.
I think that's what that was. Yeah, and the map of it's really, really clever. All over Frontier, it made Frontierland valid again for a lot of people.
Yeah,
because you had all these delightful characters, and the people who were the cast members who were running it, they weren't going all out, but they were going out enough.
Yeah.
And people were kind of going, I kind of like this. And then they did another one, which was in Adventureland. And this was a simple premise of kind of very close to the bounty hunter experience, except it was all with pencil and paper.
Yeah.
And you were looking for all these different icons and different landmarks all over Adventureland, and you would check in. If you got enough, a scavenger hunt, basically. And you were rewarded with little miniature Randotti, style tikis. And my friend Jason Simpson has collected a bunch of these. And they were all from this experience. But it was all a ruse because it was literally just a testing ground for Galaxy's Edge.
Yeah.
The whole thing.
Yeah. Which Legends of Frontierland seemed to also be.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, both of these.
And the lessons that they learned from these things, they didn't use, which was bizarre to me. And maybe they figured it was going to be too difficult to deal with long term, and they might be right. I look at our recent trip to Galaxy's Edge. And I noticed, and I tried this, I didn't even talk to you about it, but I tried this. I tried using little bits of the official language of Galaxy's Edge. Like I would greet people and say bright suns. And I would ask about the refresher. and nobody responded to it at all.
Oh, jeez.
And it occurred to me maintaining that level of interaction with your staff involves some dedication on the part of the park. It involves really training people and working with them consistently. And, it's not no skin off my nose. Like I was just curious if they were still doing it, how many years out.
Yeah.
And they really weren't. One thing I think that was maybe going on is that, we see this with Legends of Frontierland. We see it kind of working and then them walking away from it and saying, we would like to do this with technology instead.
Yeah.
Now, this is interesting to me because there's certain levels of technology that you can do this. First off, I'm going to say right now, I am absolutely not interested in attractions that are just games. I enjoy them. I'm not saying that I, as a person, don't enjoy kind of riding. I will. I enjoy riding them.
Yeah.
But for this conversation, that is just a moving video game as far as I'm concerned. And it is not the kind of interactivity we're really talking about.
Right.
So let's dismiss those and put them off to the side. But what I do see is them building the interactivity like the Bounty Hunter game that you played. And like the Adventureland game in Florida, the Pirate Hunt game.
Oh, yeah, which is really fun.
Yeah, and then the other one, Sorcerers of the Magic Kingdom.
That's it.
Which ran for a pretty long time, but was mostly like screen-based adventures. Yeah. What I find interesting is that of all of these things we've talked about, and we'll lump in Evermore, we'll lump in the Galactic Starcruiser, all of these things we've talked about, the thing that has lasted the longest is the Pirate's Adventure Treasure of the Seven Seas. Mm-hmm. It is still running. Mm-hmm. It opened in 2012.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And and it's a great experience. And it is maybe the perfect balancing act between people and technology to have this interactive adventure for the park.
I can go with that.
I think when they go one step further, you end up with Sorcerers of the Magic Kingdom, which I'm sure is perfectly fine, but I've never heard anyone talk about it without saying, but eventually you get tired of the screens.
Yeah.
But the Pirate Adventure, even though it is ultimately a technological feat, it doesn't look like one.
And it doesn't feel like one. You really feel like you're a character. Like, it's a little bit like Indiana Jones or the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, in which you're going through stuff that has been waiting for you to discover it.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm going to find some treasure. I'm going to go over there and do some treasure. That's my bad Jack Sparrow. And then you activate something happening. The booby trap gets set off, or the skeleton comes to life, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And so, it's totally a direct interaction. It's still a direct interaction because you're making up the story in your head of what's to happen.
And so it doesn't have the advantage of like Evermore or other sort of role-playing installations where the story can advance with you. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's going to be pretty static no matter what. I think they will give you different maps, but that's mostly just load balancing the attraction.
Yes.
But nonetheless, it does feel like you're having a physical effect on the environment. Because if for people who haven't done this, and I highly recommend it, it's terrific fun.
Yeah.
You will go and take, they'll say, go find this space where this X is, and there's a clue. And you do need a magic band for it, but you go up and you'll touch the space, and sometimes that will cause a cannon overhead to fire and hit a target on the other side of the street, and that just feels cool. And like at one point you go up to this fish tank and you put your magic band in front of it, and the fish tank drains and you see the clue inside where the water was. And it's like, this is great. I love this kind of interactivity.
That's pretty fun.
Yeah.
And it's about discovery on your own pace at your own time with your own story.
Yeah.
That's what I love. Yeah, you said over and over again in the past minute, you said the same word over and over again that's going to lead me to a quick little deep dive.
Okay, go.
Okay.
What did I say?
You said the word clue.
Uh-huh.
So let's do a quick little deep dive about interactive theater. This is related to interactive theater.
Yeah.
And interactive immersive theater.
Yeah.
So the question is, where did this all really come from? Mm-hmm. Okay. It starts in the 1920s with the publication of the works of Agatha Christie. Mm-hmm. Wildly popular. There had been detective novels before with Sherlock Holmes, but something about Agatha Christie just struck a chord with people.
Best-selling author of all time, I believe.
Yes, absolutely. Whether it is Miss Marple, whether it's Hercule Poirot, doesn't matter. Christie's got it.
Yeah.
It was so popular that I brought an artifact with me. Mm-hmm. This is a reproduction. It was reproduced in the 70s.
Yeah.
But actually, it was originally printed in the 1930s.
Yeah.
It's these interactive adventure games by a guy named Dennis Wheatley. And they are dossiers, murder dossiers, in which it is full of murder scene photography, letters, telegrams, evidence of even a poison pill in a little glassine envelope.
That's great. It really, I'm looking at this thing that Pete's showing me, and it really does look like there's a pouch with a pill in it.
It really is. Like some of them, and there's about 3 or 4 of these, one of which was based heavily off of Sherlock Holmes' A Study in Scarlet, and it actually has like a wedding ring on the inside. And these were wildly popular as an entertainment for long winter nights, so families could get together and solve a murder mystery. These were originally published in the mid-30s. 1936 is when this particular adventure, the Malincey Massacre, and this they also did Who Killed Robert Prentice and The Murder Off of Miami. Very, very popular. And so when people saw this, they went, the level of detail that Mr. Wheatley has put into this game is pretty great. I mean, it's on the back there. It says how many copies were sold. What does it say?
400,000.
Oh, yeah.
In 12 months.
Yeah. So that shows you how popular and how hungry people were to be a detective. And so this is also the time when people took it a step further and they started having murder mystery parties.
Yeah.
In which you would have a couple of people pretending to be these different characters.
Yeah.
So here's our Martin Mull connection.
Yeah.
It was kind of the foundation of the murder mystery party of we're all together, somebody pretends to get murdered, let's solve the murder together. Right. And using the inspiration from Mr. Wheatley's games here, that's where we get the murder mystery adventure.
Like Clue.
Which was a offshoot of this because all these people that had loved this wanted to keep doing it because it was a very, very popular game. Yeah. For people to play in England, especially. Yeah. During the Blitz, in England in 1943, they would start playing these games like whodunit and murder and using little pieces of paper and cloth. They would play this game while the bombs are going off overhead to distract themselves while they're stuck down in the underground. Yeah. There was a fellow who is a musician, who's a British musician by the name of Anthony E. Pratt. And in 1943, he formalized the rule system. He originally called it murder, but then he actually said, you know what? Let's have a little play on words here. The British version of it is called Cluedo because that is a combination of the word clue and the Latin word ludo, which means I play. Huh. So that's why it's called Cluedo. Yeah. And so Clue, with all of the classic characters, that's kind of where we get that interactive game. But then post-World War II, we have another format, which is the immersion, which becomes the historical immersion. And this is when you start having costumed docents popping up at various locations, whether it be a Bronze Age village, whether it be in Marseille, whether it be at Hampton Court, or even Colonial Williamsburg. And the reason is because there was a resurgence of interest in history at the end of World War II, mostly because a lot of us almost lost a lot of history. Yeah. Whether it be bombing, famous spots in medieval times. We were all feeling a little bit like Knights of the Round Table. We had just vanquished a big enemy. So we're kind of going back to those earlier times, which is why you see a big push in this time post-war of Robin Hood and, it's the King's Men, that kind of stuff. And so you have costumed interactivity popping up in these historical worlds. Now, because of that, we would be very remiss, and I know Kelly and I both are kind of going to roll our eyes a little bit, but we have to mention this because it is actually really important about what we're talking about. Yeah. In 1963, there was a school teacher who wanted to put together a little class activity to try and instill a love for Shakespeare with her class. Her name was Phyllis Patterson. And in Laurel Canyon, California, they used had a little backyard. They set up a little gypsy wagon, and she and her husband, Ron Patterson, presented the Renaissance Pleasure Fair. And so in 1963, the birth of the Renaissance Fair happened because of the Patterson family. And then in the 70s, early 70s, Ron Patterson started to realize that this was mostly Phyllis's bailiwick. Yeah. So he said, well, I want to do something. And so the movie Oliver came out with Oliver Reed and as Bill Sykes, and it was wildly popular. They said, why don't we do that world? Yeah. So Renaissance Fair is Shakespeare, but let's do Christmas focused on the works of Charles Dickens. And so the Dickens Christmas Fair was founded in San Francisco, and it still runs today. The Pattersons no longer run their own Renaissance Fair, but they still run the Dickens Christmas Fair. Yeah. And it has gone through many, many different transformations. Yeah. But it is also a place where I got to dabble in building interactive environments. I used to run an environment called La Légion Fantastique, which is based loosely off of the works of Jules Verne. The premise was that Phileas Fogg, which was my character, I dressed up as Phileas Fogg, had gone around the world and won his bet of going around the world in 80 days. Yeah. And then he decided to take a much more leisurely trip.
Yeah.
And during that journey, he met all the other characters from Jules Verne's books. Captain Nemo, Rober the Conqueror, Princess Aouda, the Lidenbrocks who had gone to the center of the earth, and brought all these artifacts and all these people with him to share their adventures with people and to tell people the wonders of science, exploration, and imagination. There is a video. Kelly and I will share it with you guys so you can kind of get a look into this. It was all volunteer. It was all handmade. But we had a giant squid that we would feed every hour. And do these giant squid feedings. We did a magic lantern show about our journey to the center of the earth with dinosaurs. We had a dinosaur egg that over the course would grow and grow and grow and then finally cracked open. We had a baby pterodactyl in the environment at the end of every season. We ran it for 5 years and we learned so much. And the best part of that was that's how I kind of got to become an interactive designer and really test a lot of the stuff. And I got to meet a lot of interactive designers, including Tony Baxter, who is a friend of the Patterson family, and also how I got a job as a creative director at the Winchester Mystery House, being a haunt producer. But also I got to meet another individual who is very eclectic, very creative, and has made interactive theater his life mission. And it's a gentleman by the name of Scott Levkoff.
Our mutual friend.
Our mutual friend, Scott Levkoff, runs an entertainment that he's been running for about a decade and much longer. He's been in operation doing this for, since the 90s. He also was working at the Winchester Mystery House for some time, but he's been doing immersive theater since the 90s. And his probably the most well-known thing that he's done. I mean, he's done a lot of great stuff, but one of the big ones that he was working on was something called the Mystic Midway, which was semi-esoteric, semi-social engineering, interactive, immersive world. But he had figured out a lot of great mechanics, and one of which was he did one called Midwayville, which was great. It was this pop-up theme park that had food trucks built all around it, and when you popped in, the theme park was okay. And then you start to realize, the more I do, the better the park gets. So, the more that people would interact, people would start bringing out all these flashing lights and these light trees and these different types of games and attractions would pop up the more you would do. So by the time the audience was done interacting with everything, they had basically made the park grow organically through their interactivity, which I thought was really clever. He developed his own currency. He developed his own gameplay based solely off of sharing conversation.
Well, and the interesting thing,
pretty great.
The interesting thing that Scott did, and I love Scott, is that he created a sort of adaptable template for how he was going to build these experiences, and it's sort of like remember back in the 70s when Steve Jackson had built role-playing templates where it was just you can use this for anything. GURPS. GURPS. Absolutely. It's like this is a kind of mechanics that you can just place it in whatever you want to place it in. And Scott did the same thing, but instead of for paper, he did it for live action experiences.
And Scott's partner Marty Kaplan was also did a lot of game design in this as well. So these two guys have been doing it, and they're doing a new one loosely based off of, I think it's actually a thumb in the eye to the Scottish organizers of a very badly failed Willy Wonka exhibit. But they're using a lot of the same mechanics with a new attraction that's loosely based off of the Wonkaverse. I mean, obviously, they call it the Wonkyverse. So to avoid copyright issues, but we all know what it really is. Scott does it with this delightful little wink. And I really think that the one place that is actually taking the stuff from Disneyland, both its failures and its successes, Renaissance fairs, and even a little bit of what Scott does with the Mystic Midway, is not very far.
100%. I'm glad you brought this up because I didn't want to let it go by.
So
This month at Boardwalk Times, we're talking about Inside Out 2, an Independence Day salute to the most patriotic attractions ever, Deadpool versus Wolverine, but the real showdown is between Volcano Bay and Typhoon Lagoon. Come check it all out at boardwalktimes.net. I'm glad you brought this up because I didn't want to let it go by.
Yeah, and they do a thing that is called Ghost Town Alive.
Yeah, its first year was 2019, but I think they announced it a few years before.
Yes, yeah. And they were playing with different little things, like they're experimenting, working it out. And it is an interactive experience that takes place in the Ghost Town area of Calico inside of Knott's Berry Farm.
Yeah, it is a role-playing experience, much in the same way that Legends of Frontierland is. But there's some real ambition there that they've managed to pull off, which is, it's set in, the first year was set in 1888, but every year that ticks up one. Characters come and go, repercussions from the previous season last through to the next season. They shut down for 1 year due to the pandemic, and they advanced Old West time 2 years the next year, so they included that you had missed a year of activity in the ghost town. I mean, it's real brilliance, and people love it.
Oh, yeah. And
in fact, didn't our friend Paul Barry over at Window to the Magic say that during the Halloween season is the one time of year that he doesn't go to Disneyland, he goes to Knott's so he can sit and watch Ghost Town Alive.
Absolutely. And what's really interesting about Ghost Town Alive?
Yeah.
It's almost all analog.
It's all people.
It's all people. There's
This is
zero
important.
technology on this one. This is totally what you're talking about here.
Yeah, this is absolutely important because and it seems to be the place where Disney feels uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And the Galactic Starcruiser has characters, and there is a lot of people interaction, but to maintain, that's got to be supplemented with a lot of technology. And, I didn't experience it, certainly. And I, like every good theme park fan, have watched Jenny Nicholson's 3 and some change hour-long video about it.
Yeah.
But I've heard a number of people who felt like the technology was underbaked, and that it just didn't feel like the full-throated experience that you wanted to have for your $5,000.
Yeah.
Also, the plot never advanced.
No.
You had your weekend, and there was no reason to ever go back. Ghost Town Alive, there's a reason to go back. And they're not dependent on any half-baked technology. I don't mean to be mean. I'm sure there were some incredible, marvelous things about the Galactic Star. But
Nice save.
yeah, well, I want to be fair. I wasn't there. But
Yes, okay. That's fair.
But Ghost Town Alive just depends on really smart performers. But I was thinking about, like, okay, so what are the other kinds of interaction that we see in theme parks specifically?
Yeah.
So, there's the gamifying stuff.
It's okay.
It's fine.
But it's limited.
Yeah, it is limited. There's the kind of stuff that you see in Rise of the Resistance, where it's like a multi-tiered queue, basically. But the people working the queue are in character, and they are, interestingly for a Disney park, treating you poorly.
Yeah.
So, they're taking you in to be interrogated. You've been caught.
Yeah.
So it's a slight interaction. We see this kind of multi-tiered thing. I don't know if you've heard of this, but I just ran across it recently. This thing called Pacific Rim Shatterdome Strike.
No.
It's in Indonesia, in Jakarta. And
No, we flew. Sorry. Sorry, bad 1930s joke. Anyway, go ahead.
But it's like anything with kaiju these days, they put the Pacific Rim name on it.
Yeah.
But it's super interesting. It's done by some of the people that were involved with Star Trek The Experience.
Ooh.
The much beloved and much missed Star Trek The Experience.
Which is going to get its own episode. Because
Yes.
it has to. That's a retro episode we have to talk about. Because it was so cool.
But they, in it,
they do this clever thing where they send you, like they say, hey, you're going to go into a Jaeger simulator and you're going to pretend you're fighting monsters. And you stand in line in front of, what looks to be a normal queue door, like with rails and stuff, and everyone's in their lines. And someone comes running into the room from a different direction and says, uh-oh, there's actually been a kaiju attack. We got to get out of here. So the queue is fake. Those doors don't open. and you go chasing down the hall with interacting with this person that's like, oh, no, something's gone horribly, horribly wrong.
Oh, my God.
And you do eventually get to a ride vehicle. You're going, like, they hand you flashlights.
Whoa.
And then you're going through dark tunnels with flashlights. I think this is super cool. Like, they put you on a ride vehicle. You go a little ways through the ride, and then that breaks down, and they're like, you got to get off. The ride's broken.
Oh, jeez.
And you go running through more halls. At one point, you see a kaiju face painted on a door. And they're like, oh, yeah, this is just something that's part of the ride. And they open the door, and there's an actual head of a dead kaiju in the room. It's a Godzilla-looking thing.
Oh, man.
And to get out, you have to walk through his mouth.
Oh, God.
Down his body. And get out through the hole in his intestines.
Oh, my God.
So this, and then there's an actual vehicle ride.
Wow.
Where you're fighting them. And it's just like, it's a whole different kind of interactivity. Yes, you don't have much say in it.
Sure.
But you are being involved. You are being involved as a character, which is something that does, as much as the early Disney guys would say, well, you are Snow White. Nobody thought of it that way.
No.
Nobody understood
Not really.
that.
No. No offense.
Yeah, no offense.
No offense, guys, but no.
So, yeah, there's stuff like that. There's stuff like the long-term evolving stuff like Ghost Town Alive.
Yep.
There's obviously escape rooms.
Oh, yeah.
There's a whole thing we maybe is a whole other episode.
I think so, yeah. It's kind of an interesting beast.
In Bali, there is an attraction, what's it called? Road Rage is what it's called. I don't know why.
Wow.
And it is a fairly standard, just vehicle through a dark environment.
Sure.
But you start off locked in a room and you have to do the escape room. You have to solve the puzzle to get out of the room to get on the ride.
Ooh.
These are neat ideas. These are neat combinations. But, it started leaving me to ask, I was like, what is the responsibility of you as a guest towards your own entertainment?
Yeah, and you had mentioned actually before we did this.
Yeah. And the entertainment of others, actually.
Yeah, and in the entertainment of others, absolutely. And how important is interactivity?
Yeah,
in a theme park? You had posed this to me, and I want to hear your take on this.
Okay, so I think, and maybe I'm alone in this, but I don't think so. I think amusement parks.
Yeah,
they have a singular job.
Yes,
that job is to take someone, usually a young someone, through a frightening experience safely.
Yes.
So you build up some fear, but the kid knows, or the adult in our case, knows that it's going to be okay. And they come through it, and they've grown a little bit from that.
It's the old axiom that is a sign and universal creative: danger minus death equals thrills.
That's right.
Yeah, and absolutely,
that's right.
That's an amusement park, like thrill parks.
And I don't want to just leave it at thrills. I want to say these are important rites of passage.
Oh yeah.
Like you getting on, for me as a kid growing up in Texas, getting on the Shockwave, which was the double loop roller coaster at Six Flags Over Texas. That was a rite of passage. When I did that and came out, I felt bigger than I was before.
I felt the same way when I rode the Demon at Great America.
Yes.
Yep, absolutely.
And so I think that's the case for amusement parks. And I think theme parks, which we'll call Disneyland and Knott's and Universal and stuff like that,
right,
have a similar responsibility, but just there's a slight level of
intellectual nuance added on top, which is that there is some story there. It doesn't, I would argue that telling a story from beginning to end is not the point.
I agree.
And this is where I might take issue a little bit with things like Rise of the Resistance, which I like, but I don't know that kind of complex narrative is the work of the amusement park. So I think that the amusement park is there to take post-industrial society kids who have not had to face the kind of trials that earlier generations have had to face and put them safely in those trials and through them and give them a sense of triumph out of that, which leads me to sort of conclude, to make this work, failure has to not be an option. Ultimately, you need guardrails. Right? That's the point, is that you're going through these things with guardrails. And so my question about bringing kind of role-playing interactivity into amusement parks is, are we mixing two things that shouldn't go together? The reason being that if you are, like this is how I started this off, if you are somewhat responsible for your own entertainment, you can fail. And you know, you could feasibly fail others.
It's true.
And you could fail with embarrassment. You know, I did enough. I didn't do a ton of LARPing, but I did enough to know what it was like to have a bad night. In fact, I might argue that there were more boring nights than there were great ones. So that's putting a level of responsibility on the patron. I know this is getting a little esoteric, but it's been whirling around in my mind lately.
Well, this is a hurdle that needs to be overcome.
Yeah. You know, in the same way that you ride a roller coaster and you have to believe that you're going to be safe in spite of the thrill that you're going to have. And in the same way that you ride a dark ride and you have to believe that the thing that's going to pop out at you is actually not going to hurt you, even though it's still going to thrill you. If you are role-playing in an amusement park, you have to believe you're not going to be embarrassed.
Yes.
And this is the thing that is why I'm like, we are not there yet.
But the trick is that the audience is sophisticated to know what's going on. They also know when, like you say, they're being embarrassed by someone who's lording it over them.
Yeah.
This happens a lot at Renaissance fairs. The minute somebody starts making fun of what you're wearing, oh, pretty my lord, you're wearing a weird shirt with Mickey Mouse on it. What is that? You know, and you're like, don't be stupid. Just pretend I'm dressed like a knight.
Well, and even worse in a situation is if you're trying to play along, you start stumbling or you can't keep up.
And there's,
which is that's most people in the world. They're not ready for that kind of improvisation. And I think, and I'm in no way am I trying to cast shade on Renaissance fairs or Dickens Fair or anything like that. No. I'm saying it might be a different art form.
I agree. And I saw this at Galaxy's Edge where you actually had adults and kids dressed as Jedi with absolutely no idea what to do with that. Yeah. You know, and it's, let's face it, walk around and say, I'm a Jedi. Okay, now what? Yeah. You have to have a moment. You have to be able to have actors who are flexible enough to go, I'm not in charge. I'm not the main character. That kid right now, the camera and the film that it's projecting, it's recording, is in his skull. Yes. Not around us. Yeah. There's no hidden camera going, here's this actor. He's playing Boba Fett, and he's the star of this story. No. The little kid who's dressed up as Rey, who desperately wants something to happen. Yeah. That's the main character. You have to have, everybody's ego needs to go out the door and understand that when you transform a kid or an adult or an elderly person who is willing to go through the trouble to say, I'm ready to play. You do everything that you can to maintain that fabric because you're literally holding them up and you're taking them by the hand, very much like Superman flying around with Lois Lane.
Yeah.
The minute he lets go, she's going to fall.
Right.
You have to be willing to go, I'm not in charge. You're in charge, kid. What do you want to do? You want to be a Jedi? You know what? You look like someone who might be interested in joining the New Order. That's the magic.
That's the magic.
That needs to be there.
Yeah.
And that's basically my plus up is, well, also, this is a little butt kissy, but I think Disney needs to hire someone like Scott
Yeah.
to actually work with him and say, okay, we've got you for a week. We're going to pay you for a week. Tell us how you make that work.
Yeah.
So we can really make that promise come through.
Or someone that is specifically an improv teacher.
Yeah, I mean, it needs to be a new position at Imagineering where it's not just about the people who are developing all the new technology. All the new technology, all the droids, all this, like, hey, that's really great. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But you need someone else to go just as far with psychology, with game development, with interactive theater, to do that type of deep dive to say, if you're going to put on an immersive and interactive environment, they've got immersive down.
Yes.
That's not their problem.
Absolutely.
Their problem is saying, and it's interactive. You haven't even scratched the surface, man.
Yeah.
So you need someone who's just as dedicated to the developing. And that would be my plus up for not so much Knots, because Knots is kicking butt with that.
Yeah, they've got it working. And what they've managed to do is make it seemingly as fun whether you participate or not.
Absolutely.
So if you're like kind of shy and don't want to participate, that's fine. You're still going to have a great time. And I think you're in my plus ups almost exactly the same. It's just lean into the people.
It's the people.
Lean into the people. Give them the training and support that they need, and don't keep leaning into the technology. The technology is neat enough, but, and I'll plug me, if you've read either of my articles about tech debt in Disneyland Park, you will see that the technology is getting away from them a little bit right now. But people are reliable, and people can sense emotions. You know, we saw the little Huey, Dewey, and Louie droids at Galaxy's Edge, and very interesting. I looked at them, looked up a little bit what was going on there, and obviously we both saw the guy that was controlling them, but they are only sort of controlled. They do see human body motion, and they do react to that, which is a remarkable step. But they still can't do it as well as a person can.
Right.
So more people. When, as Disneyland's slowly getting rid of, for some reason, live performers, I'm saying put more live performers in. Put them on the streets, put them in the attractions, put them in shows. More people.
I agree, 100%. I mean, put more people everywhere, not just in Galaxy Edge, but everywhere. Yeah, because that's where people really want to connect. They don't want to connect with just a building. They don't want to just connect to a colored light. Yeah, they want to connect with people, and those are those. There's a reason that there are personalities like Tiki Maynard. Yes. Who have left an indelible mark on the park. I mean, he is long since retired, but he's still left an indelible mark on the park. Yeah. So I agree. Totally agree.
All right. I think this is a good place to leave it. I think this has been a great discussion. It's
been a weird one, but it was I think it was a good discussion. It was an interesting dive on what is a buzzword that I think will be actively changing, and who knows where it will go. So again, Disney, hire Scott Levkoff. Anyway, I'm sure Scott's like, no, don't hire me. Anyway.
Stop saying my name.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm Peter Overstreet.
I'm Kelly McGovern.
And you've been listening to
The Lowdown on the Plus Up. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Lowdown on the Plus Up. If you have, please tell your friends where you found us. And if you haven't, we can pretend this never happened and need not speak of it again. For a lot more thoughts on theme parks and related stuff, check out my writing for Boardwalk Times at boardwalktimes.net. If
Feel free to reach out to Pete and I on our Lowdown on the Plus Up Facebook group, or send us a message directly at comments@lowdown-plus-up.com. We really want to hear about how you'd plus these attractions up and read some of your ideas on the show. Our theme music is Goblin Tinker Soldier Spy by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.com. We'll have a new episode out real soon. Why? Because we like you.